Well, it looks like we're live, I think. And if that's the case, then hello, Steelers. And welcome to this special live stream tonight. I've got, as you can see, Richard Knott, Storm of Steel. And with me from Two Fat Lardies, as I'm sure most of you will know. I'm just double checking this here. So, how's everybody out there in Chatland? Say hello. There's a few of you that turned up early. Andy and Dex, for example. Bless them. But tonight, I thought what I'd do is, with the imminent release of the Far East Handbook, I thought I'd have I asked Richard if he wanted a chat, and he seemed up for it, didn't you? And so we thought we'd have a chat. Not off, indeed. We thought we'd have a bit of a chat about the book, as it's going to be literally released. What, in about? Is it Monday? It's coming out? No, 5 days, I think, isn't it?
Monday. But we got them today, and I've been posting them to Australia and New Zealand. They've all gone there already at the International Sorting Hub in London, and the American and North America are going to go tomorrow. But it's here. It's here.
Amazing.
So and Monday we'll be posting all the UK ones out on Monday. Apart from you, Alex, because you were whinging off air beforehand, saying you wanted an advanced copy because you're a celebrity reviewer. So I have said that I will make an exception for you and send it out tomorrow.
Don't spoil the magic. Don't spoil the magic. Or I'll reveal some secrets about Lard Island that you don't want to get out. It's great to see it actually in the flesh, isn't it? I mean, for as long as I've known you, you've been pretty much writing that thing. So it's nice to know that it's actually there and it's finished, and all the mistakes in it are now going to be shown to everybody across the world.
Exactly.
There's no going back.
My work here is done. My purpose in life is finished.
That's it.
It's all over now.
You can lie down.
It's all downhill.
Well. So I thought, like as we said, we discussed this off air. We discussed a bit before as well. We were talking really because you did your live stream the other day, and you were kind of answering a lot of the questions that people have got about the book and about the list and all that kind of stuff. There's no point going over old ground. I mean, we could do, because it would be it'd be a lot easier, but I think it will. We both thought it was more interesting to do something else, wasn't it? Really, but still within that the Far East thing as well. Dex is saying apart from the Pacific. Well, that's coming, Dex, I think, if that's the case, I'm sure. But so we kind of wanted to do a bit of a deep dive, didn't we, really, into history and wargaming. And also I had a few questions for you, some of which you rejected, which I might bring up later on. We'll see how we go. But the first one, I think, let's go back right to the start of the writing of the book, because I think the first time that I saw that you were doing Far East stuff was probably when you were back in 2019 at Partisan. I looked through my old my show report for that, and it was the I can't remember if it was British versus Japanese, and you had the little tennis court and stuff for it. Do you remember
that's right.
Was it? Where was that?
Yeah, that was Malaya.
That was Malaya.
Was set in Malaya.
Palang
Karang.
I remember that one being, taking my interest, because my interest in Malaya anyway. I don't think we really knew each other at that point. But were you at that point in 2019? How far into writing the Far East Handbook had you got, or even had you started, or was it just you were playing about with ideas at that point? How far back?
No, I've been working on it for over a year by then.
Really?
I look back. I look back through my emails. Well, one of the issues is we had COVID, and COVID kind of stops play testing dead. And if you're developing anything which is involved in any rules, you've got to play it. And really during COVID, the only thing that I had on my Wargames table was a beer machine that I bought, and I bought 90 gallons of Birra Moretti. and that was really the prime use of my table during lockdown. I wasn't able to get gaming, but I did shift a load of beer. But only when we emerged
Swings
from
and roundabouts, isn't it, really?
Well, that's right. In many ways, those were the best days of my life, as somebody once said. But yeah, I had a great lockdown. It was brilliant, actually. My two daughters came to live with us at home because one was in Australia on holiday, and they both came back here, and the sun was shining. We had a load of beer in. It was just party time. It was really nice.
Brilliant.
Anyway, sorry about people who died, but never mind. Yeah, so I was well and truly on the way with it at that point in time. I'd really been started on it, I think, about 2017, 2018.
Oh, okay.
And the thing that really initiated it was talking to a chap who I mentioned quite a bit, Len Tracy, down in the northern part of Australia, who was the guy who ran the jungle warfare school for the Australian Army, and he'd come up with some rules for it, and I just thought, wow, these are really, really interesting. And it to be honest with you, it was something I didn't know a lot about, because like most war games, we tend to be very European centric. I guess because we've got the luxury here in the UK, and especially if you live in the southeast in the UK, you can be in the battlefields, and you can leave home before breakfast and be in Normandy by lunchtime, walking the ground. And then, of course, we go to Crisis a lot, so that gave in Antwerp, that gave us access to especially some of the battlefields of 1940, places like Cassel, where you have some really interesting actions. Calais, Les Attaques just outside there, where you've got the searchlight unit. So all these things are right on our doorstep. Why do we need to go further afield? And my dad was in the RAF in the Second World War, and he ended up going to the Far East, and consequently I had absolutely no interest in A, the RAF, or B, the Far East. So because obviously when you're a kid, your first task in life is to completely ignore anything that your father's achieved. So I wasn't really that interested.
Yeah, that's why we're not
no. So I thought, yeah, this will be good. I'll have a look at this. But what I didn't realise at the time was just quite how much research was going to be involved. It's only now looking back, you think how naive I was. This is half the war. It's literally half the war in 2 books. Had I done North Africa, or had I done, if I was going to do Barbarossa, let's say I was going to do 1941 through to the fall of Stalingrad, I could knock something like that out in a year quite easily. Again, North Africa and the Mediterranean, and that would include Italy. But you go to the Far East, you've got so much diversity going on there in terms of locations where they're fighting and styles of warfare. I mean, one of the things I discovered was that, was the fact that the Japanese had very different tactics on the Pacific Islands to what they had in Burma, because the operational area were very, very different, and that meant that in on the islands, the island hopping campaign by 1944, the Japanese were really just digging in and selling themselves dearly. They were not conducting a war of maneuver. They were simply being the biggest speed bump possible. Whereas in Burma in 1945, they're still attempting to fight a war of maneuver, almost blitzkrieg type tactics, because you've got the beauty of large amounts of space with a lot of men, but not enough men. If you had that many men in Europe, it wouldn't fill it up. So it's a really interesting, dynamic, fluid campaign, as is evidenced by the attack on Mandalay and Mektila, and then the drive south from there towards Rangoon. That's a British blitzkrieg happening in 1945. You don't get that on the islands, obviously, because there's nowhere to blitz to. It's just a slog. So
you've only got so much space.
I just learned that it was so much bigger than I ever thought it would be, as the actress says.
I think that, you know, us in the West in particular, we probably don't really realise how wide an area the Pacific or the Far East is. You know what I mean? In
Yeah,
like you say,
yeah,
from Burma through all the way to the islands. It might not look like much on a map, but you know, it's thousands of miles, isn't it? You know, and it's far, far larger than the European theatre, which is quite enclosed if you think about it. And like you say, you know,
yeah.
they're completely different terrain, completely different setup in those different areas. You know, each island had to be fought for tooth and nail. But then, as you say, you've got the Blitzkrieg, but then you've also got the Japanese Blitzkrieg earlier in the war as well, you know, through Malaya and things.
Very
You know, that
much
was
so.
something. Yeah, I mean, I was in Singapore, and that's where I learnt about the Malayan campaign and the fall of
Yeah,
Singapore. I'd heard about it, but I knew very little about it, and so I was going to museums over there and visiting battlefields, and that's where my interest came from it. And as you say, it's difficult to get there because it's a 13-hour flight, I think, to Singapore, isn't it? So you can't exactly just hop on a plane and be there,
no,
you know, an hour, or drive across the Channel Tunnel or whatever, you know. Yeah, so we get
yeah.
a very Western European centric, but it is an incredibly interesting and very overlooked period, I think, and theatre. Apart from, I would argue, probably the island hopping stuff with the Americans. Is that something that
That's a
you?
big headline act.
It's a big one. Sorry.
That's the big headline act, isn't it? That's the one everybody knows.
Mm,
You know, we all saw Band of Brothers, but then did we see what was the follow up one, that the Pacific Wall,
yeah.
which actually, when I watched the Pacific the first time round, I thought, oh, this is a bit dull. But once I'd done all the research on it, you realise that they're following around about 4 or 5 guys who wrote their own accounts of it, and they are
Yeah.
sprinkled through it. And once you've done the research, it all makes sense, and you realise,
Yeah.
oh, that's his experiences, and that's his experiences. But I didn't necessarily feel it had the dynamism that Band of Brothers did. It didn't really capture the imagination. And again, it's that sort of forgotten war, forgotten theatre of war. So yeah, everybody thinks island hopping, but to me, island hopping is tremendously interesting. And that will be covered in the Pacific Handbook, and you're going to be looking at a lot of things like amphibious warfare there.
Yeah.
But it's very varied. So one of the things that we want to cover as well is going to be the war in China. That's a totally different kettle of fish.
Yeah, completely. And again, because of the size of the areas that these places are being fought over, and completely different tactics and completely different theatre, isn't it? It's completely different war, different feel to the rest of the war completely. But so you said you were kind of writing it a year before so kind of 2018-ish. I mean, what was the thing that really? What can you remember? What it was that was the thing that made you think, right? I'd like to sit down, right? Because you kind of mentioned there. This is a long statement in the form of a question, or is it a question in the form of a long statement? But you mentioned, you know, the 1940 stuff, and I'm assuming your trips to the battlefield was what inspired the 1940 handbook. But obviously, as we just discussed, the trips to the battlefields of the Far East are a little harder to get to. What was it then that pushed that? You know, push you over the line to get it started, or to even start thinking about it for as a theatre to wargaming?
I mean, it was the conversations. Excuse me, the conversations with Len, who had started writing down his own ideas in terms of what he thought would be represented. Now, obviously, Len's an expert in jungle warfare, and you don't get those opportunities very often. To talk to somebody who's really got that understanding, because as you rightly say, I can't hop on a plane. Well, I could, but the budget of doing it would be astronomical. And then once you realise how big it is, you know, you want to look at what happened in Malaya, you want to look at what happened in Singapore, then you want to look at what happened in Burma, and then you want to look at what happened in, you know, the borders of India with Imphal and Kohima, and then you want to have a look at what happened in the Dutch East Indies. You know, it's a lifetime's project. You could literally spend your life doing it, and you haven't even started on the Pacific yet. So it was really a case of thinking, right, here's somebody who really knows their onions, and who can assist me, because obviously the first thing I wanted to do was to understand the way war was fought in jungles, and really then have that opportunity to bounce ideas off somebody who was intimately knowledgeable with that type of environment, had operated in that type of environment on many occasions. And having that opportunity was, once in a lifetime chance. And it gave me the opportunity to say, well, okay, great. I mean, what do we want to achieve here? And then it was his part of the deal was to give me the advice what the outcome should be, and then my part of the deal as a sort of game designer was to say, right, how are we going to do that? How are we going to achieve that? So it's been very much a project of working together on that. And Len's obviously got a good deal of knowledge on the Japanese army, and specifically around the Pacific area where the Australians were operating. The Australians undertook a huge number of amphibious operations, and very interesting operations. If you're looking at their first contact with the Japanese on the Kokoda track, and then you've got them operating around Wau, and then at Milne Bay and all those different areas, and then moving over towards the end of the war into Borneo and places like that. Really interesting campaigns. So but it's obviously taken time, but I mean it was an opportunity that was too good to miss. And the more I got into it, the more I thought, this is amazing, this is hugely interesting, and we as Wargamers are missing out on it. But I mean, you do think, what the hell am I doing this for? Because probably 8 people are going to play it. But
well, I'm assuming your pre-sales are doing all right. If you've just taken 2 tons of books into your storage area.
I ain't sold books, but
sitting on, turn them into furniture.
Well, it's going to be a bit like that, actually, because there's another ton and a bit that I don't know what I'm going to do. We've literally run out of space. So
parties are week.
Well, yeah, but I'm not going to shift several tons worth of rules there. But yeah,
well, if you do a hard sell, then you probably will. I don't think you're working hard enough. That's the problem. Everybody should leave with one at least if they go to Partisan. So yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Len, because both myself and Dex, who's in the chat at the moment, we're playing through the Malaya pint-sized campaign that's Len wrote. So that's got some jungle rules in it, but obviously, I mean, I know anyway, having seen the handbook already and also played some of the jungle stuff, but you've gone quite a different path with the jungle rules. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, and just about designing? Because let me just finish. I mean, for those that don't know, they're quite different from what Len's, I guess, original jungle rules are to what the finished result is now in the handbook. Over to you. Sorry, I didn't want to put you off in your prime before you started.
I think my prime's long gone, mate. But yeah, it's Len came to me with his ideas in terms of those rules and that campaign, which I think, I'm not sure if they weren't in Lard magazine. I can't quite remember. Really, I felt it important that there's no point in having the best set of jungle warfare rules in the world that people aren't going to play. So what you need to do is make jungle warfare rules quite accessible. You've got to lower the barrier to entry. You have to decide what aspects of it are really important in terms of making a difference in the game. Now, I'll give you an example there. Len was very keen on reflecting the importance of heat exhaustion, the effect of heat exhaustion on troops operating in that environment. And from what I recall, when you moved, you would roll a dice and you would see if you had heat exhaustion. Well, I'm not particularly keen on tests. When you know, if you roll to move, you don't to then want to do a second roll to do a test to see if you've got heat exhaustion. So I felt it would be easier to wrap that up into another mechanism. So if we have an end of turn roll of 3 6s, you can get a minor random event. Normally, when you roll 4 6s, you get a random event. But in the jungle, in intense heat, on 3 6s, you get a random event, and it's a 50% chance you're going to have an issue with heat exhaustion. So I had long conversations with Len. What's the intent? What are we looking to reflect and represent? And I felt that I wanted to reflect that in a way that flowed a little bit more in the game, so you weren't having tests that kept breaking into the flow of the game.
Yeah. No, that makes sense completely, I think.
So very much working with him to agree what the outcome was going to be, and then this is how we're going to do it.
No, I mean,
there's another thing.
Go on.
There's another thing in there as well about visibility in the jungle, and the advantage of well-trained troops in the jungle, where we give people 2 options in terms of the green dice, which you roll to reflect variable visibility. So if you're behind a wall, you're behind a wall. Your visibility is fairly clear. You know, you're behind a wall. If you're in a jungle isn't built by a builder so that it's homogeneous at all points. You're going to have points where visibility is worse, points where visibility is better. And I introduced a different mechanism to the one that Len uses. But what I then also did was added the jungle skills so that better trained troops are able to ambush more effectively. Better trained troops are able to be more effective in the patrol phase. Better trained troops are going to be better at patrolling because the mechanisms allow them to be more effective in doing that. So rather than just saying this is simply about visibility in a jungle, it was also about how people took opportunities that the jungle presented. You read the book that says a jungle is neutral. Well, the jungle's not neutral because the jungle favors the troops who are trained to operate in it and are confident because of that training. And that's what I really wanted to reflect.
And you've been playing, I know you've been playing the pint-sized campaign recently, which I'm assuming is going to be released either alongside or within very soon at least. I mean, I don't think there's any secrets here, but it's a Jittera campaign, isn't it? Or the fighting around Jittera, what was meant to be the stop line in Malaya, the first one, which completely failed because the Japanese are tanks.
It's a two-phase campaign actually. I mean, the whole issue was that the RAF were commanding in Malaya, so the commander in Malaya was Royal Air Force, and they felt it really important to push. They'd identified that if the Japanese were coming, they were going to be coming from the north, and that they would probably move through Siam or Thailand. The name changed in 1939, but people didn't seem to realise that for about 20 years. So they realised that the Japanese were probably going to land on that east coast. So the far north of Malaya and 2 ports in Thailand, which would give them the 3 axes of advance into northern Malaya. They'd identified that, and the RAF said, well, look, what we're going to do is we're going to put our bases right up in the north because we're going to protect the oil wells, but it's also going to be a statement of intent. Look at us, we're here. You don't you dare think about landing, you naughty Japanese people, because we'll get you. But of course, that meant that they opened up their airfields for an attack. In fact, 50% of the Royal Air Force operating in Malaya was destroyed in the first 24 hours. So a complete waste of time. But what it also did was it meant that the army had to deploy in ridiculous positions in an attempt to protect those key airfields. And the line at Jittera is an important one because it's actually covering from the mountains to the sea, as popular refrain. which in northern Malaya, and the army were there forming what they felt was a sort of Maginot Line of northern Malaya. But in fact, it wasn't. I mean, it all existed on plans. And then when they did come to use it, it had been completely swamped by the monsoon rain. So they were bailing out all the trenches and having a nightmare with the communications, because all the telephone lines had become rotten with water and everything. So it was a right dog's dinner. And what they realise is that they're going to have to delay the Japanese. So they send 3 columns. They send an armoured train off into Thailand to blow up a bridge just with a platoon of infantry, which they do. But they also send another column going up into Lakehole, going up into Thailand to start blowing up bridges and culverts all the way back down towards the Jitra line, which they hope will buy them time to move troops to support them, because the 2 brigades on the Jitra line don't have their 3rd brigade in reserve, because it's 160 miles away on the day war's declared. So they've got to get them north, but they also got to try and bail out all these trenches and get telephone cables laid. So it's a really interesting campaign, because the first 3 games are about delaying actions on the northern trunk road, north of the positions. And then we've got the assault on the Jitra line itself. So how much support the British have when the attack happens on the Jitra line will depend on how successful they've been in delaying the Japanese troops. So the first 3 games are really interesting, fighting to delay actions, whereas the Japanese are keen to be able to create a blitzkrieg rolling down. One of the Japanese generals the Japanese general who commanded the 5th Division there referred to it as a driving charge, which I thought was something you got if you were doing 35 miles in a 30 zone. But that was his phrase. So he was attempting to get a driving charge.
They were going that fast.
No, he was attempting to get a driving charge going. So what we do is, in the scenario, if the Japanese can seize the British line of communication marker, if they can seize the British line of communication, they will be able to advance to the next game in the same campaign turn, and that obviously reduces the amount of support. So it's a real cat and mouse situation. So it's great fun. Really, really, really enjoying it.
Really, this is the second time you played through it, though, isn't it? And I'm assuming this is the second time with the newer rules, the new handbook rules, a bit more firmed up than first time round. Am I assuming that? And they're working on the table. I know you play test this stuff to death anyway, don't you? But is it a massive difference in the way that the campaign is being played out on the tabletop using the new rules? I mean,
yes, it is. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It feels a lot more like the historical accounts. So we have the first scenario where we've got a Punjab regiment up at a place called Changla, which is just south of the border, and they've got engineers working on a bridge, and they are attempting to hold the Japanese off while they demolish the bridge. And the Japanese have no tanks in that scenario, because the British blew the bridge in Thailand when they first met the Japanese. British actually took a couple of 2-pounders up there. They knocked out 2 Japanese tanks. They knocked out a third, and then they withdrew, and the bridge went bang, and they buggered off to the south. So they took up these positions. Well, what's happened in this campaign is that we played the initial playtest game, and the Japanese effectively went round the British flank and were threatening the British lines of communication. Now, the British were very lucky that they were able to generate a chain of command dice so that they could end a turn, because they can pull off after 1 turn has ended. If they can't, and they've only got 4 command dice because they're as green as grass. So if they can't end the turn, if they pull off, they will be routed, and they then won't be able to fight the second scenario. As it was, they just got the pit they needed just before the Japanese nicked the line of communication marker. But the British, having thought, we're going to defend the river line and shoot them up as they come down, suddenly go, bloody hell, what's that moving in the bushes? And it wasn't you. despite your bush moving picture that we have today. So we have grapple me great nuts. It was straight out the books. So the British just managed to withdraw. So then they withdraw to a place called Nanka, which is about 3 miles further south. And there, what happens is Nanka. They look it up.
Monetization.
It's well. There we go. My command of the Malay language is relatively limited. I've learnt it all from the Jungle Book, but it's so they form a position on this in some jungle overlooking these huge paddy fields, and the Japanese by then have got their tanks moving. So the Japanese are coming down the trunk road, but they've got this vast open space. But we had a game last night where the really interesting game where the Japanese sent out they put like 2 scout teams on the table. One of them was actually a jitter party there to entice the British to deploy an open fire. So the British deployed an open fire. The jitter party just disappeared. It was just people throwing fireworks about and using a Japanese ruse to do that. And then, but that masked the actual patrol scout team that was going forward, and that the Punjabs were very lucky that they decided to launch a counterattack. Otherwise, the Japanese could have been around their flank again. As it was, the Punjabs launched a counterattack. Were very lucky that they got the right roll moving in the jungle. They rolled a 6, got into close combat and batted them away. But having got the British to deploy, the Japanese deployed their knee mortar squad, and they started battering the hell out of these green Punjab troops. And they rolled on a tank, which added its fire support. And the Punjabs were getting to the point where they thought, well, we've got to pull off. Well, they weren't able to generate a chain of command ice to end the turn. And with the Japanese threatening their line of communication, they pulled off. Now, what's happened is exactly what happened historically. The Japanese now blitzkrieg on through and have completely overrun the battalion. So that battalion is now not available to go into reserve on the Jitra line. So it's happened exactly exactly as happened in the in the historical campaign, which is it's great to watch it. And it's really rewarding to actually see history coming to life on the game, because you think, okay, I'm happy with what I've achieved here.
Yeah, so that kind of leads us pretty swiftly then into the next question: is history in wargaming important? I mean, is it, obviously the handbook itself is what the culmination of now 6 years of research that you are still doing by the looks of it, right up to publication. How important is it then to start look, if you're wanting to wargame stuff on the tabletop, how, where do you start with that from a historical point of view when you've almost got a blank page? In this case, the Far East, it's very rarely touched, I guess, from a wargaming point of view. Where do you go? I mean, how do you know, how important is it to get that stuff right?
For me as a game designer, or for a normal wargamer just wanting to play games? Or for both?
Bit of both, really. 2 questions, 2 answers in there. First of all, for you as a game designer, I mean, your personal thoughts on it, and then also, how far do you think wargamers want to take that historical side from your experience?
Okay, that's two quite different questions. So let's start with me. I think it's a lot easier to design a game based on in a historical war game rather than a science fiction war game, because if I'm designing a science fiction war game, I've got to make it all up. What effect does that super zapper ray gun have? Well, I have no idea, because they don't really exist. So I have to make it up. Whereas if you say, well, what effect would you expect a Lee Enfield to have? Well, we've got a pretty good idea because we've seen casualty levels, we've got historical accounts, we know how a Bren works as opposed to an MG42 or whatever, and we understand those strengths and weaknesses based on millions of accounts that we can read. So for me, I think designing a historical war game is something I'd much rather do, because I don't need to exercise a designer's imagination. What I need to do is understand the period and then make decisions. What is the best way to reflect that on the war games table? Because you've got to have a game that is playable. You've got to have a game that's enjoyable. You've got to have a game that people can pick up, and it will flow once they understand the rules and they're used to what they're doing. It shouldn't be something where the rules intrude on the gameplay, or as little as possible. So for me, what happened historically informs the design choices that I need to make. I think I'm fortunate and unfortunate that I had a really good friend, Paddy Griffiths, who was a bit of a mentor for me when it came to studying military history and understanding military history. Was for better or worse, I never got the opportunity to go to further education or whatever. So I've had to learn as a bit of an autodidact, and that's been fine. But it really was tremendously helped by having a mentor in Paddy who gave me some fabulous advice, as well as being a really great fun bloke. But his methodology was what he called tactical snippeting, and basically he said to me, what you've got to do is read everything there is and then draw conclusions from that. Now that might sound simple, but it's complicated, because you do have to read everything there is. The volume of research that you have to go through is voluminous, which is good for volumes to be voluminous. It's colossal because you find, by doing it that way, you find things that you wouldn't be aware of if you just picked up. I would hate to pick up the name of any particular publisher, but if you picked up a general purpose history that your average wargamer might read, that's probably not the type of thing that I need to read as a game designer. I need to read more broadly and in more depth. So and also start from a point of view of discarding any preconceived ideas that you have. Now, the great thing about the Far East was I had no preconceived ideas, really, apart from the banzai charge and all that from the commando, because that was the only research that I'd done on it. But you do have to rather discount what commando comics tell you about history, and you have to go at it with a bit of an open mind.
Yeah, some of the early commando comics might have been written by veterans, but I think they were quite biased in their writing, weren't they? The ones in the 70s.
I bought a copy of, I thought I had it on my desk, but I bought a copy of Best Commando Stories in the Jungle, and it was only published about 15 years ago. But I think if you published it today, the police would be involved. Some of the language in there is really quite derogatory. It's just, bloody hell, this is really only 15 years old. But if I'm honest, it made me laugh. It was so politically incorrect. It made me laugh. But I don't think everybody would have taken it quite like that.
No.
But you've got to start with your research, get an open mind, and allow yourself to come to conclusions as you go, and make lots of notes. So I mean, one of the things that's in the British national characteristics is a thing called a blitz party, the ability to form a blitz party. Well, I never read about that in any of the historical accounts that were written by historians. But it was a term that I kept coming across in first-hand accounts by people who were taking part, either as officers or whatever. Anyway, what the bloody hell is a blitz party? So, and I just kept coming across it. And And I haven't got the details in front of me really, but there was a colonel who was tasked with writing a report, and I think it was after the fall of Singapore, although it might have been after the Arakan, I can't remember. But he comes up with this idea that what we should be doing is forming blitz parties made up of all the automatic weapons from a couple of sections, because by that time we're dishing out the Thompson submachine guns left, right, and Friday, because we're recognising that firepower is really important. In fact, the Australians recognised very early that firepower is important, and by 43 we're starting to learn lessons from them and their experiences in WoW and Boona and Gona and Milne Bay. And then I literally, I was on, funny enough, I was on an airplane coming back from Singapore, and all of a sudden I found a reference to it in one of the books I was reading, and that was it. I got it. I could have danced around the aircraft because I was so over the moon, because I kept coming across this phrase again and again and again. But would never. But of course, all the veterans knew what it was because they were there, and they didn't feel the need to tell people what it was because everybody knew.
Yeah.
But anyway, I found it on that flight back from Changi, and I was just like, this was like 3 o'clock in the morning in whatever time zone I was in, and everybody else was asleep. But being 6'5", all the seats are like this, and I'm squashed in reading this book, and suddenly, yes, I've got it at last. So we were able to put that in there, but that was only through tactical snippeting, looking at these little bits of information and pursuing that. But you can't pursue it. You have to just keep reading. And the more you come across it, the more you'll discover. In the end, you'll discover what it was.
Yeah, I guess that then another question that follows off from that. I mean, is like you say, you had no real background in the Far East. You have no knowledge of it.
No.
You know, your own words, really, pretty much. So, I mean, where do you even start as a when you got, there is such a vast amount of information out there? Do you just go to the basic stuff? You know, the popular history, and then work from there, or is it, you know, do you start diving into the archive straight away when you're doing your tactical snippeting?
No, you've got to understand the big picture. You've got to understand the wallpaper before you can look at the details in the room. To use the analogy, it's very much a case of Sorry, I'm just laughing at something I'd seen. It's very much a case of what the bloody hell was I saying?
You're looking.
You've got wallpaper. You've got to understand the big picture before you can start looking at any of the detail. So the way to do that is to get a big book of World War II and read the sections on the Far East. And go, right, I've read the big book of World War II. At least I understand now what it's about. It's about Japan's desire for natural resources. It's about the fact that America and Britain and then the Dutch East Indies put an oil embargo on Japan. And that means Japan either goes, right, we're going to pull out of China, which they're never going to do, or they're going to go to war with the Western powers in the Far East. So really great use of sanctions there. So it actually becomes ticking time bomb as soon as those sanctions with oil are placed on Japan, and they're going to do something, and they're not going to go, well, all right, then we'll go home and we don't cause you any trouble anymore, because that's just not the way it works. So you get to understand what it's about, and then you start reading. You're still at that point in time reading big picture histories, and once you've done that, you then start looking at individual campaigns. So you'll then start reading sort of operational histories of what's going on. Once you've understand that, so you're percolating down through the different layers, if you like, in the filter. Once you've understand what's happening at an operational level, you're then looking at so you look at strategic, understand that. Operational, understand that. Then you look at tactical, and that's where I'm really interested. That's the bit that I'm really interested in. But you won't understand that if you don't understand what's happening above. So, and there you're looking at manuals. But more importantly, what you then have to say is, that's what it says in the manual. But I got my cycling proficiency badge and I don't necessarily obey all the rules of the road. So what actually happened, and the only way you can get that is by reading first-hand accounts of things like unit diaries, and having a look at how much training they're doing, what they are training to do. You'll have done this yourself in your First World War studies. You'll have looked at the unit diaries, and they tell you very clearly about how stupid old General Haig has his men training left, right, and Friday. And you can actually see what they're training for. And you can do that in the Second World War as well. But then you read the first-hand accounts by people and you who were actually there, and you're saying, you know, George MacDonald Fraser is a really good example. He talks a lot about, you know, people talk about, oh, you've got to read Quartered Safe out here. Yeah, I do, but I mean, it's not the only book I read, but it is one that you've got to read. And it is a very interesting book because he's a pretty blunt and straightforward bloke, and I value that because you should be getting honesty from somebody like that. But yeah, loads of self-published accounts that you have to find on eBay and pay stupid money for. But then you can take it further forward. So, for example, looking at the Kokoda track in Papua New Guinea, I'm buying books on walking the Kokoda track today, because that gives you real practical information about what the terrain's like, which you don't really get from a historical book. So it's diverse sources is really important. Now, I wouldn't suggest that wargamers have to do that. You know, your average wargamer at home has to do that, because I'm only doing that because I need to design the rules. You should be able to take what I've written and pick it up and play it and actually enjoy it. Now, do I think that there is an advantage for you to read some history? I do, because I think that will allow you to understand what the rules are allowing you to do and what the rules are replicating. Because why had the Japanese got a jitter party? If you've never read anything about the war in the Far East, what's a jitter party? What relevance does it have? Why have they disappeared as soon as they're open fired on? Well, they were there to make you open fire, because they're attempting to draw your fire. So you can't. Do you want to literally reflect that by having a 3-man team go roll a d6 to throw fireworks or shout out hello Tommy and this, that, and the other? Or do you actually just abstract it by saying, here's a jitter party, it's a cheap support, but it might draw the fire of the enemy, which means they have to deploy on the table, so you now know where they are. It's a ruse. So you abstract it. And by reading a little bit about first-hand accounts, I would suggest you will appreciate and understand what the rules are going on about, which makes the game more enjoyable. It will allow you to design scenarios more effectively as well yourself, because it's great to be able to fight a war game, but it's really interesting to fight a war game based on something you've read about.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, you know, I play historical war games because I'm interested in history, and I like to see it on the tabletop, and I like to see it reflected in the rules that I play. And that kind of goes back then to the question that I asked. You know, the two-parter question was, you know, in your experience, how much do you see wargamers enjoying the historical side of historical wargaming, shall we say? In your experience, I mean, you know, obviously it's a very broad brush, isn't it, there?
And my experience is probably restricted to people who play my games, because I play a lot of my games because I go to lots of Lardy Games days. And when I'm at Partisan or Salute or whatever running a game, I'm running my game. And you almost exist in this bubble at war game shows. And people go, did you see that game with the big elephant and the red hat on? And you go, oh, no, actually, I didn't see anything. And they, what did you buy? No, I didn't buy anything, because I just literally, all I saw was what was in my little bubble at my table. And I played a game with about 12 people and we had a nice time. So my view of the world tends to be rather one-eyed in that respect, that I get to play a lot of games of rules that I get to play a lot of games of rules that I designed with people who like playing my games. I I see a lot of people who really love history and are really interested in putting history on the tabletop. But I also see a lot of people who go, I really, really love playing historical scenarios in the pint-sized campaigns that you've written, but I don't necessarily have the confidence to write that myself. So I'm really keen that you write more of them. And that's something I'm really keen to do, because throughout the whole lockdown thing, there was such a logjam of projects all rammed in this drain pipe at the same time that nothing was coming out the bottom. But we're clearing that now. And I'm saying, going forward, I really want to be producing more pint-sized campaigns so that people can enjoy that. I do think that there are a lot of Wargames rules which are written specifically for competition gaming, and Wargames hobby shops love competition games. Because we use the local gaming store. We're there on Friday with Nick and Sid, myself and Noddy. We're playing some game about a board game about Dutch ovens or something. Anyway, we're going there, and when you go there, you see that on the wall they've got all the lists of the competition rankings, and they really want that because those games they sell over there. So they want you to play those games. And so in that environment, your friendly local game store is very, very keen to get you involved in that sort of competition type of environment. And the big emphasis there probably isn't, let's refight a historical battle, because it's a lot more about, I've got 1,500 points, you've got 1,500 points, let's have some fun. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's just a different environment. So, but surely those wargamers who are there playing competitive World War II games must be interested in the history, because there are a lot easier games, I would have thought, to play at competitive level, where you can just get some Space Marines or something and go and do that. The fact that they've actually said, look, I really want to paint up an 8th Army force or an Afrika Korps or Soviets at Stalingrad means they've got an interest in that. So I don't see any reason why they won't then say, okay, we've had a great time playing that competition, but why don't we do something historical? It's an opportunity. It's not a threshold everybody wants to cross or will cross, but that's fine. There's no obligation to do so.
So then, on the back of that, you're obviously massively into history, because otherwise you wouldn't be writing these handbooks as you are doing, and the amounts of legwork that you do in the first place. Do you think then that the wargamers in general would benefit from reading history? You've said pretty much they don't. You don't have to read history to enjoy these games, but is it worthwhile to do it when you're playing Chain of Command, or is it something that you don't really need to do with, let's say, for Chain of Command? That's what we're talking about. Would I, if I'm the everyman at Partisan, I turn up, I buy my Far East Handbook. Should I then go away and get the big book on the Far East history, or am I okay just to jump in and start playing it straight up and trying things out as and when I want to? What do you think? What's your thoughts?
Well, what you want, but but the reality is that the more you understand what actually happened in reality, the more you will understand what is happening on the tabletop, and the more you'll understand what the rules allow you to do. Will it make you a better person? Will it allow you to have a large shiny car and a lovely house and beautiful wife? Well, probably not. But the world's not like that, is it? But will it make you a better wargamer? No. Will it make you a better person? Yeah, probably. Why not? A bit of learning helps us all in life, doesn't it? It's nice to know things. There's a lot of thick people out there who are very happy with their thicko lives. So maybe it's not necessary at all. I know a lot of people who know absolutely nothing and are perfectly happy.
Happy in
I'm not talking about wargaming. I'm just talking about people generally.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got tons
So
of
maybe
books over there, and Dex keeps handing my ass to me in every game that we play. So they don't make you a better wargamer, that's for sure. I just suppose I've got to read
what
them in
you
the
do,
first
mate,
place, haven't I?
yeah, it's no good colouring them in. You've definitely got to read them. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, look, let's
But
talk a little bit
I
about.
do think, if I could make a point, being serious,
Mhm.
I do think that the Far East Handbook for Chain of Command is it's a move. It's the biggest move away from the main rule book that we've seen, because there are lots of factors that you simply don't get in Europe or North Africa. It's great. You can go to North Africa with Chain of Command. You get a few walls, you get a few rocks. You don't get a lot of terrain per se. It depends where you are. Obviously, Tunisia is different to Libya and so on and so forth. But all the things you get in Europe, you get in North Africa, but less of them. So that's easy. The problem is when you go to the Far East, all the things you get in Europe, you don't get. You get another load of other things that you've never seen before, like rubber plantations and paddy fields and jungle and secondary jungle and jungle fringe and all these different things. And so suddenly you're in a completely alien environment. You're in an alien environment physically, and you are in an alien environment because you are facing an enemy in the form of the Japanese, let's say, who do not behave like the Germans or the Soviets or the Americans or the British. They behave in a totally different manner. And in order to reflect the way they actually behave, you have to create rules, or you have to create variations on existing rules, because reinventing the wheel is not what you really want to do. You have to create variations on existing rules in order to reflect what happened historically.
Yeah,
but that's obviously when we're talking about jungle. I mean, somebody's just made a point to say not all places are jungle. I mean, Hong Kong, as rightly pointed out, was not jungle. You got quite a bit. You get quite a bit of woodland there, and you get quite a lot of steep hills. Hong Kong is a different again, but you don't necessarily, that there are options in the Far East book that say you only apply the jungle warfare rules if it's like 25%, more than 25% of the table is covered in jungle. So in Hong Kong, you wouldn't apply it. Last night's game, we had big open expanses of paddy fields. We didn't apply the jungle warfare rules because nobody's really in the jungle.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the fighting in Malaya, it's not in the jungle, is it? It's down that main trunk road, because that's how you get tanks down there, and it's in open areas, relatively open areas. Yeah. I had a question there for you, and it's just completely gone out of my head. So you've already mentioned like some of the new rules and things, and also, I mean, I've looked through it, and the terrain is one of the big things that seems to be completely different. And I have played a game of it with you umpired at Epau Lard a few years ago with Terry, and I think we were playing the US Marines landing against Japanese positions, and it was absolutely awful, because both Terry and I talked about it afterwards, and we were both saying that we were fighting as though it was Normandy, and like you say, you just can't do that. And I think once the rules allow you to reflect that, I think you've got it right. The fact that you have to rethink everything that you thought you knew previously. I mean, I'm not going to say that I would have been any good anyway in Normandy 1944, but I'm sure Terry would have been. But we were held up by the heat. We were held up by Japanese snipers. It was an absolute cake and arse party. Not to put too fine a point.
It was very funny, actually. It was very funny. Terry would have been brilliant in Normandy clearing mines. You could have just rolled him over them all. Well, I think it's one of the important things to say, apart from insulting Terry. Sorry, Terry, if you're listening. One of the important things to say is that, yes, there is all this different terrain, but there ain't all of it all the time. So in the Jitra campaign, you've got secondary jungle, and you've got jungle fringe, which is the fringe around the secondary jungle. but that's all the jungle terrain there is. So you only have to go, oh right, that's moving in that is, and all the movement rates are based on the rules in the existing book. So if you're in primary jungle, you just can't run. You can't move with 3d6. You go with 2. It's a bit harder in secondary jungle. But then you get, after that, all you get are rubber plantations, which are like woods, so not exactly different. And you get paddy fields. So you've really only got 4 brand new types of terrain in that whole campaign. And you very easily will go, oh, right, okay, that's how they work. And then Chain of Command works with those. But it does look like, wow, this is a load of new information. Yes, it is, but you don't use it all at once. So the good thing about the Jitra campaign, it's a great introduction to the Far East, because it allows you, it's not hugely terrain heavy. A lot of those tables don't count as jungle terrain, but you do get bits of jungle on there. So it's a great introduction. The other thing we've done is we've got 4 scenarios in there which are designed to introduce you to different aspects of warfare, whether you are playing the British or the Dutch or the Japanese. It's, here's a scenario that allows you to try out the bunker rules. Here's a scenario that allows you to try out this, that, and the other.
I'd like the addition of those new rules. The new scenarios as well. In the end, I noticed that, and I thought that was it's a nice way, like you say, literally of introducing people into just those. Because you've got the Japanese attack in Malaya, haven't you? As they're coming down the trunk road, you've got the roadblocks. There's is it called Demolition Derby, which is the attack on the Japanese position, and then the crossing of the.
That's right. That's Chindits, really. Yeah. Inspired by the Chindits. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice that you're able to pluck one of those 4 scenarios and just go, right, okay, we're just going to try this out with these rules, and I think that's a really good addition to the overall book itself. Anyway,
it was inspired by, if you remember, with Through the Mud and the Blood, we produced a supplement called Stout Hearts and Iron Troopers. And part took laughing at the back, and part of that was to introduce scenarios taken out of the training manuals of the period, and say to people, right, here's your first chance. What you do is there's a little German position over there at that crossroads. Let's see how you're going to do it, and you then get the opportunity as a gamer to try out the rules for the period in a training game, if you like. And we decided to follow that because it's a very new period. But the campaigns we're producing, I'm just starting to work on the second campaign, which we've also played, which is 1945 post Mechtilah, and it's the British driving south towards Rangoon, which has been the road to Rangoon scenario has been around so many Lard Games days. It's I think people sick of seeing it, really, but there's been a purpose to it, which is that we play tested the whole campaign on Lard Island, but we also took it around the shows and play tested as well. And that again doesn't have very much jungle terrain, and that's a British blitzkrieg driving south against crazy Mad Max Japanese defenders. It's got a Damarung end of the Reich, but for the Japanese, and they are bonsai bonkers, mate. So it's again, you're not getting a lot of jungle terrain. You're not getting a lot of different terrain types. So it's really easy to pick up and play without having to worry about creating a whole table full of stuff. The other campaign that we're doing is called Going to the Dogs. Now, what do you think that might be about, Alex?
I don't even want to. I can't even. I don't want to.
It's about White City. It's about White City in Operation Thursday when Mike Calvert, and of course, White City was a famous London dog track, which only people my age will remember. But anyway, it was a clever name. So we're looking to do that, and away we go. Somebody's asking about Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps armoured cars. Paul at Sabotage does make.
He does do them. They're not on his website. Email him.
No, email him. Email him. Let me see if I can show you a picture on here, because there's one in the actual book.
There is.
So if you look at that one there, it's all backwards. That one there, that is a Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps armoured car. Really interesting. Twin turrets, Vickers in each. The rest of it is a bit like the van that comes around with sandwiches on the industrial estate at lunchtime. But it's quite an interesting piece.
Every armoured lunchtime.
Everybody comes out. Can I have bacon, lettuce, and tomato, please? And a packet of frazzles. So there were two types. There were several. The Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Corps used several types. By the time we're looking at, there's a question there from Hedonia. They use several types. By the time that we're looking at here in 1941, the main type that was being used was the one that I've just shown you, and the older type being used as headquarters vehicles. And basically, they're not really heavily involved in the action. So the ones that we've got in there are that. But yeah, contact Paul at
Sabotage.
Sabotage with a 3 instead of.
He sent some out to me in 15 mil, so he does have them. So
they're cracking. They're really lovely vehicles. Yeah. He and I did a load of. He designed those based on the research that I've been able to do, finding obscure photos of them once they've been captured by the Japanese and things like that. And we kind of had photographs of like 96% of the vehicle, and the remaining 4% we made up. Basically, but it wasn't very much. Yeah. But there was just one bit we weren't certain on the angle, but we knew it was generally like that. So we had to make a judgment call on that. But
I won't ask which bit it is, but to go to the rule.
It's at the back, right at the back.
Right to the back. Okay. Well, I think the handful of people that probably know more about the Hong Kong Volunteer Defence Force armoured cars are probably not going to be that bothered, are they? Most people didn't even know they existed probably until this point.
No, that's probably.
The other question I wanted to ask you, again from a personal point of view, now you've got your rules, and I don't want to say which you're most proud of, because you don't like pride, or at least you say you don't. But which of the rules are you most pleased with? Which of the individual rules that you've written from this book, which ones do you think are the most, the ones that you struggled over and you were able to pull it out of the bag and go, right, yes, I'm happy with that, very happy with that.
Give me half an hour. I'll have a quick read through, and then I'll let you know. I am actually pleased. With the terrain rules, because we went through it. What are they? So here we go. Primary jungle, broken ground. So it tells you what they are in the main rule book. So you go, all right, broken ground. I know what broken ground does. Secondary jungle, heavy going. So we just use the terminology of the rules to describe exactly what. I do like the observation green dice. I do like that. I think that's an interesting touch. I like the jungle craft rules. I was really most pleased with the jungle craft rules, because what I've attempted to do is to say how does that restrict you, but also what opportunities does that provide for you? So you've got 3 types of jungle training. So you've got poor jungle troops, experienced jungle troops, and jungle warriors, who are like the king of the swingers, jungle VIP, and all that. And obviously, what that does, it tracks the development of the different armies at different times. So the Japanese in 1941 are experienced jungle troops, and by 1942, some of them are jungle warriors. But whereas the British are poor jungle troops, you get some exceptions. So maybe the Argyle and Sutherlands would be experienced jungle troops because of the training they've done. Some Australian units as well. Although I have to tell the Australians that they think they're better than they were in Malaya. But there we are. We won't tell them that in public. But because really they were learning the lessons that we were learning. They really learnt their lessons down in Boona and Ghana. and that was where they got dead good. So I'm really pleased with that in terms of the way it works. Some of the opportunity for the can jungle warriors run through the jungle? No, they swing. Sorry. No, can't run through the jungle. What they're more likely to be able to do is ambush at longer ranges from their jump off points. So we're abstracting some of the skills. They're able to patrol more effectively. The scout teams can operate more effectively, which allows them to move more efficiently through the jungle. And then really, if you're moving through the jungle, you don't want to be going around in a coach party. You want to be moving your jump off points forward by utilizing chain of command dice. But the patrol markers, so jungle warriors in the patrol phase, jungle warriors their patrol markers going to be moving 14 inches rather than 12 inches. And if you're up against an enemy who are poor jungle troops, their patrol markers are only going to be going 10 inches. If you're in a jungle. If you're not in a jungle, it's all back to 12 inches. But it does mean that better quality jungle troops are going to be getting their jump off points in a more effective position.
I mean, this is something that we Dex and I are finding even with the older Len Tracy's rules, where the Japanese have got the jungle fighter. They're using 14-inch for their patrol markers to move, and you soon feel very swallowed up by somebody who is a better fighter in those conditions. If you're not,
you really do, especially on a broad table where you're fighting across the width of the table. That allows. In fact, one of the things we've done in the Jitra campaign, that we've created T-shaped table maps. So the T-shape. If the Japanese are trying to get a hurry up and race down, they attack down the length of the table because they're trying to maintain the blitzkrieg. If they want to delay a turn and recce the ground, they will attack across the T, which means that they will go on a broader front, which gives them real advantages against a poorer jungle trained opponent. That then. But they've delayed a turn, which means the Jitra defensive line is going to be stronger. So there's costs and benefits involved in the campaign. But if you want to use your skills, you've got to do the recce in order to get that benefit, and the recce takes time. So, in a campaign term, it's kind of
So in when you're actually designing these rules and you put these rules together, I mean, what's the process is obviously you play test them. I guess you just you come up with them on paper, having talked about it and things, and then you kind of whittle in, I guess, batting ideas back and forth. And you're saying, as a game designer, you need to then mold those ideas into a workable game that people don't. How much input do the play testers have when you are putting these things on the table for the first time? Because I know you have your club. In the broadest terms, I guess, it seems to be play testers for chain of command from what I can work out, or for the next Lardy set of rules. So
we're not a club. We're a Wargames development group. These guys are there with us, and that's what we do. We play one game every week. Everybody plays that one game, and we talk about the issues, and we do it. So it's basically the hot house, if you like, of ideas. We put ideas in there, test them out, and then we develop them. Because the nice thing is, I've been gaming with these guys since we were teenagers, a lot of them, and they will tell me what they think without any qualms whatsoever. And that's what you need. Speak truth unto idiots.
I think that's the phrase, but
no, but it's very applicable. But so it's hugely important to test it, because you get ideas about rules, or you get ideas about scenarios, and you think that's a really good idea, and aren't I clever thinking that up? And then you put it on the table, and it's bloody awful. It's terrible, and the only way you discover that is by actually playing it. Because things that are good in theory, like everything, communism, religion, things that are good in theory actually turn out to be pretty grotty in reality. Let's not go down that route. But yeah, so
You've already demonetized me once, so let's not do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so it's hugely important. The most important thing is you make sure you bloody well listen.
Mm.
You know, I've been involved with some people who, you know, said to me, you know, I would really value your input on this, and you know, what do you think? And you give them your input, and they go, oh yeah, but no, I like it how I've got it. So you go, all right, well, I'm really glad I got input.
You didn't want my input there, did you?
Yeah, no, well, they did. I think they wanted my input to be, this is fabulous, and I really love every aspect of it. But that's rarely the case, is it? So it is so important when you're developing a game to have. I've got Nick, who is a fabulous sounding board, and he's a pretty good ironing board actually. But so I can bounce ideas. Well, we put the stuff on the ground, and he's like a mobile one. So he's good because he will tell me the truth, and I will tell him the truth when we're designing games. There's no issue about, you know, can I tell him that I think this is awful, because I very easily can, and he very easily can tell me that I'm coming out with a load of bollocks. So that's good to have something like that. But it's also good. I mean, it's interesting, actually. You know, often you will say to people, right, what do you think? Oh, yeah, we love it. It's really great. It's absolutely fabulous. But actually, it can't be. Not you give somebody a set of rules that's at play test. Not everything will be really great and lovely. They're just being nice because they like me. I don't want people to be nice. I don't even want people to like me. I just want people to tell me the truth. But part of that is making sure you're prepared to listen and respond to that. Because if three people are telling to you that rule mechanism is clunky, you can't say no, it's not, because three people are telling you it is. It obviously is. You've got to declunk it or change it completely.
Yeah. Okay,
and I am good at listening. I am good at listening, and I don't have much of an ego, which does help. So. That's right. Where's my crown? Hold on. but, no, I don't. And it's so that's true.
I mean, I've seen Lord Island. I've seen the room. I've seen all the awards that you've won over the years, getting dusty and having not been looked after at all. So yes, I agree. I don't think you have much ego. So
they're all stacked up. Piled up behind the radio. Yeah.
If anything, they're just taking up space for you, aren't they? Really.
All right, look. Actually, I mean, what do you do with them? Honestly, look at this. Hold on.
Don't break
it. It's great. It's great. 2019 best participation game at Crisis. It takes up half the bloody room, and especially as the other one's next to it has just fallen on the floor. And you're right, it's cobwebs and dust. But I don't, what do you think I do? Sit here looking at that, admiring myself in the reflection. I mean, really, I wish they'd given me a big slab of lager. That would have been a much better prize. I could have enjoyed it, and then
that definitely wouldn't be taking up much room, would it? That would soon be gone.
No, not for long, man. Not for long.
Brilliant. Well, look, we've been at it for about an hour and 20 minutes now. I think it's probably about time we wrapped up a little bit, because that coffee's probably wearing off you, isn't it? And I need to go to bed.
Yeah, the Sunny Delight's still going.
Is there anything else you want to chat around for the next little bit? Or are you're happy with? Have you got across everything you thought you wanted to get across?
I didn't want to get anything across at all. I was just happy to come on your fabulous show, mate, and meet the steel pickers. It's nice to have a chat about something that I care about.
Yeah. Well, no, look, I'm really, I've been excited for the Far East Handbook since you first mentioned it, and as I say, it's at least 5 years now. So I'm glad to see that it's come to fruition. I think it's definitely you've definitely done the legwork from what I've seen of it. and I'm really looking forward to getting the hard copy of it. I just can't wait. And I'm sure people in chat, there's quite a few people watching. I'm fairly sure that most of them are probably either already bought the book or are contemplating buying. And so I can definitely say, from my point of view, just get it. Don't think about it. Buy it. It will be good, and it'll be something interesting to use. Even if you just read the history side of it, it's a different part of the war you probably didn't know much about.
I think what I like about it is it's so different to game. We haven't changed the rules completely, or we haven't even changed the rules a lot. But what we've done is put in some really key changes that allows us to reflect a totally different theatre of the war, and it is just it's actually asymmetrical. It's totally asymmetrical. It's not like Vietnam, but it is asymmetrical in that the armies who are there fight in totally different ways, and the rules need to reflect that. They need to reflect the Japanese skills and abilities in 1941, and they need to reflect the fact that by 1944, after Imphal and Kohima, they don't have those skills, but they're still trying the same things. But I'm really pleased that it plays such an interesting game and such a different game, and I'm really enjoying playing it. Which after been playtesting it for like 5 years, I shouldn't be enjoying playing it, but we're having such a good time at the club, and I'm really enjoying going back and redoing the historical research for some of these pint-sized campaigns that I'm producing for it, because it's just that's the thing I really love about my job, is being able to do the historical research and then play that out in games. And that's how we design campaigns. I mean, that's living the dream for me. That is absolutely what I could do for the rest of my life, and not bother about publishing anything else. Just do pint-sized campaign forever. But let's face it, it's probably not going to be that bleeding long. So, but
especially if we're drinking slabs of beer. But
I think tomorrow, mate, I've got a big day tomorrow. Big day of beer tomorrow on my St Albans pub crawl.
Yeah,
which I'm doing. I've got another 8 pubs to cross off tomorrow.
Oh well, that's good. How many have you done so far?
8.
That's practically historical. You've only done the 8.
I did 8 last week, a gallon at a time. 8 last week. Tomorrow, another 8, and I reckon it'll take me 7 weeks. 7 weeks, one day each week. So that's my treat. That's my treat for finishing off the Far East Handbook.
And I think it's very, very well deserved. Absolutely.
Right. Over the moon.
And I think on that note, I think we'll leave it at that, shall we? That's enough of that. So I think I'll say goodbye to everybody. Thanks everyone for watching in chat and keeping going and stuff. And I hope you've all enjoyed it. I certainly have done. And as I say, I'm looking forward to it, to getting the hard copy, and I'm sure everybody else is looking forward to it, and they will get theirs as soon as they can. All right, do you want to say good night, Richard?
Not off.